Well, today we're in the third part. We're continuing our message series, Formed for Life, and how when we really align every aspect of our lives with our spiritual walk, with our faith walk with Jesus, how he not only brings that to alignment, but how we experience his hope and his goodness in our life. The first week, 2 weeks ago, we talked about the first part of the form, and that's family, and what does that look like in our home and our different relationships. Last week, we talked about the O, and that's your occupation, your Monday through Friday. How do I live for Jesus and honor him and walk with him even in my workplace or in my school, wherever that may be. And today we want to focus on the R that holds this. It's the glue that pulls everything together, and that's our relationship with Jesus. And this is the critical part of our form, because our relationship with Jesus drives everything else in this. And if we don't get this right, if we don't focus on this area, then we will be out of alignment in every aspect of our life, spiritually speaking. And today we want to talk about that relationship with Jesus and what does that look like. But in order to do that, we need to have a mind shift, an attitude shift from a lot of ways that we tend to view this walk with and faith, this walk with Jesus. 24 years ago, I said I do. And I made a commitment to my wife, and that changed everything. It took me a while to figure that out because I'm a knucklehead and I'm not always that great. And you can ask my wife and she'll let you know that I had to learn something. You see, up to that point, my life was all center focused on me. Making me happy, pleasing myself. What do I want to do this week to make myself happy? And then once I made this commitment, I realized something. I have to stop being so selfish. Because I was a selfish knucklehead. And in those early days of my marriage, I really had to have an attitude shift, a focus shift. Rather than it's all about, okay, what's in it for me? What are you going to do for me? How are you going to make me happy? What do I want to do today? What do I want for dinner? All that different stuff, all those different things, I had to shift my focus to, how can I please you? How can I honor you? Because I made a commitment to this relationship, and if I really want to experience the full reality of this relationship and all the blessings of this relationship and this commitment, I have to shift my mind to me, to you. And it changed everything. And see, that's what the journey with Jesus is all about. That's what it's all about. It's this, when you commit to Jesus, everything changes. But the struggle is, in our initial commitment to Jesus, it's kind of a selfish commitment. Let's just be honest, I'm the same way. Because we commit to him solely about Savior, which means, hey, just give me the good stuff, give me the goods, make my life great, keep me out of hell. Let's just have it that way. Let's make Jesus make my life a party, right? It's a selfish commitment, but it's a reality. And at some change, we have to understand in this commitment, he is my Lord, he is my King, and it's about what pleases him, because he gave up everything to me to have this relationship. And how am I giving up my life to experience him more? Because when I do that, I experience his goodness more, his love more, his grace more, his guidance more, that just opens up so many other things for my life. And here's the struggle, friends. This is the struggle that we have in our faith journey. We constantly view this more as a religion than a relationship. That's where the mind shift changes. When we focus about this all about a religion, our whole faith journey is about, okay, what do I need to do just to kind of keep myself in good standing with Jesus so I can get all the good stuff, right? I go to church each week, I do these steps, I do all this Hail Mary stuff, right? Just to give God a chance to help me, make me better, right? To experience the good stuff. When Jesus came to say, I want you. I want you. It's a relationship. Everything changes. And just like in my marriage, my mind had to shift. My attitude had to shift. It's no longer about, I'm not in this to say, what are you doing to please me? Because when it's a religion, guess what? We often just go to Jesus and we do all the things we feel we need to do just so, Jesus, give me what I want. keep me out of hell, make sure I get to heaven, help me to have a good life, make sure I'm healthy, make sure my relationships are good, make sure my job works out. Just give me the good life. When Jesus is saying it's not about that, it's about me and you in a relationship. It's just like in your marriage relationship. You ever hear about the triangle of love? There's a triangle of love. You really want to experience true happiness in your marriage relationship, true experience of love in your relationship, you have to understand the triangle of love and to have that equally, have all equal sides on that, right? And the first is the passion. The passion is what drives that relationship. It's the thing that says, hey, you're really cool. I want to be with you. I like this about you. And just like that, we come to Jesus. Hey, I really like what I hear about you because guess what? I don't have to spend eternity in hell. I get to hang out with you for eternity. You can maybe make my life kind of good. It's that passion that drives us there, right? But too often, we only equate love to passion. And so often when we hear marriage couples who say, I'm falling out of love, and I talk to them more and more, what they're really saying is, I lost the passion. Because they've only equated love with passion. And the same is true in our relationship with Jesus. When we only equate our relationship with Jesus through passion, it's like this kindling to a fire. It goes there and it's gone. It's like, boy, that was a really great worship service. I'm on fire. That was awesome. Let's go. Then Monday hits. It's like life stinks. Where's God? I can't believe he turned his back on me, right? Because the passion faded. It leads us to the other part of the triangle, and that's the intimacy. The intimacy is that heart-to-heart connection. I know you. I get you. I'm here with you, right? In marriage, that's what makes that relationship so strong. When you get to that heart-to-heart connection, I'm for you. I know you. And Jesus, guess what? He knows you better than you know yourself. He gets you. And he loves you. Whereas that bottom part, the foundation of the triangle is commitment. I am living this life for you. I'm all in for you. And here's the beautiful thing. Jesus was all in for us. You know why we know that? Because of the cross. Because of the cross. And in this relationship, what he's saying is, I'm all in for you. And I'm asking, will you be all in for me? That's this journey. That's this journey. And in Ephesians that we're kind of walking through as we kind of talk through this form, it's a really great letter to identify the form because Paul dealt with the church in Ephesus and all the things that they were going on that we today can really relate on. And it all starts with this relationship and understanding what this relationship, and I have to stop making my whole focus about me. I have to stop making my endeavor in life about, hey, it's all about what makes Bill happy. What do I feel I should do? And I need to have that mind shift to, I got to stop. It's not about me and how do I make myself happy. It all gets back to, how do I please God? How do I know him more and please him more in my life, in my walk? Because I will never experience him more. I will never know him. I will never get what he wants to provide for me if I don't make that my focus. And the same thing is in my marriage. I won't get the best out of my marriage if I'm selfish in it, right? The same is true in our journey with Jesus. And so this is where the backdrop of where Paul's getting into the R of our form, the relationship. Ephesians 4, verses 17 to 18, Paul writes this. So I tell you this, and insist on it in the Lord, that you must no longer live as the Gentiles do, in the futility of their thinking. They are darkened in their understanding and separated from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them due to the hardening of their hearts. See, hear what Paul is describing here, give you the whole backdrop. He's talking to, in Ephesus, the Gentile believers, those believers who did not grow up in the Jewish customs, those believers who came to Jesus outside of the Jewish custom. They were living by the worldly standards, and they were living in a city in Ephesus that was controlled by the worldly thinking of the Gentiles that was all about, how do I get myself ahead? How do I make me happy? What do I do? And what Paul's highlighting here to the Gentiles believers primarily is he's saying this, friends, You see, when you give your life to Jesus, there's a new standard. And following Jesus demands a new standard of conduct in our lives. It demands it. You're a new person now. You're not living for yourself anymore. You're not living the old ways anymore. You won't experience the full reality of Jesus if you don't follow him and walk with him, because it's not just like, boom, he just makes it all happen for you. He gives you the path to walk to experience his goodness more. That's what he provides. That's what this relationship is all about. And it's developing this relationship and living in a way that pleases God. And here, you know what the irony thing of life is? Here's the crazy irony of life. In this world, and the same as true in Ephesus in that day, because I think this is a human nature issue. This is a human nature that's always been around. And Paul is dealing with this all the way back in the church in Ephesus in what they're dealing with today. And I think as we look at it, hey, guess what? This is exactly what we're dealing with today. In our struggle, in our walk. And here's the irony. You want to know what the irony is? See, the mindset in Ephesus of that day was, live to please yourself, make yourself happy, do what you feel is right to achieve your life, what you want for your life, and you'll be happy. The irony is that leads to constant frustration and disappointment, and you're never there. You're just frustrated in life all the time. But the irony of this is, biblically, what Paul's highlighting here is when you adjust your focus, you change your mindset, you change your standard of conduct to match the ways of Jesus and follow Jesus, guess what? As you walk that path, there you find joy. You experience his goodness, a joy that sustains. That's the irony of life. The world teaches us to follow our way, make our own path, make ourselves happy. And God says, no, live to please me, and I'll be your joy. I'll be your joy. I'll be your satisfaction. And what Paul is insisting on here in these verses is really identifying what it means to live a life that's worthy of that requires this new standard of conduct. It's a transformation, because the Gentiles in Ephesus, they were so worldly focused. They were so focused on what pleases you. How can you make yourself happy? How can you get yourself ahead? And Paul's saying, no, stop living that way. You'll never be satisfied. That path is destruction. You'll always be disappointed. And the Gentiles in Ephesus, they were just careless. They were careless morally. They were careless with their lifestyles and who they were, because they're all focused on their own personal pleasures. And in order to focus on your own personal pleasure, guess what you have to do? Knock other people down. And it was just a place full of brokenness. And Paul's saying, friends, we can't live by worldly standards. And I feel we really struggle, because as Christians, just like in that day who Paul's addressing in Ephesus, the Gentile Christians, they're struggling because they're kind of walking this line, right? I love Jesus, at least that's what I'm saying. I have a passion for him, and I want to experience him. I want what he gives to me, but man, I'm surrounded by all this. This looks good. This seems like it would make me happy. This feels good in the moment. And before you know it, in our faith journey, we get careless. We get careless. We try to walk this line, hey, let me just figure out what I can do just to make Jesus happy so I can get all the goods from him, but really enjoy life. That's what the Gentile Christians in Ephesus were really wrestling with. And Paul is saying, you are but living by a new standard now. You're walking with him. You want to experience him more, and this demands purity. This demands maturity in your walk. This demands unity in Christ. And what Paul is saying there, then he says that because they were going down this path, they just had, their thinking was futile. There was no purpose. It was just empty. There was no desire or a knowledge of knowing God. And all it developed was a life full of this idle vanity. We're trying to build something and that we think is going to make us happy. We're trying to build this life that we think will give us pleasure and fulfill us and make us holy and good and fulfill everything we desire. But in reality, it's all vanity. It's all worthless, because at the end of the day, I'm never happy. And when I finally get it, the money, the relationships, whatever it may be, and I feel I've arrived at what I thought would bring me joy and happiness, it's not there. It's all vanity. And then Paul, what he describes is this futile thinking. In other words, to try to chase this, they became foolish and careless with their lives. And we're just kind of running towards anything and grabbing a hold of anything that they thought just could make them happy or fulfill what they felt they're missing in here, or help them to feel better about themselves. And all it led to was a lifestyle of frustration. And I fear so often today we find ourselves in that same road, constantly frustrated in life because we're trying to fix something or find something in this world when it's never to be found in the world. It's always been Jesus. And Paul says that they went down this path more and more. He wrote, they were darkened by their understanding. What he means by that is they had this sense of their sense of moral distinctions and understandings were just getting more and more blurred. When they started to realize what was right and wrong and what honored God and what was morally right, it started to blur, because it was all about, well, what can make me feel good? What can make me happy right now? How can I walk in my path better to make me more satisfied? And Paul says their eyes of their hearts were not enlightened. And what he was describing there was this moral and spiritual blackout that happened, this hardening of their heart. It's kind of like when you're at home at night and you ever have a storm come through and you're sitting there, all of a sudden, bam, the electricity goes out and it's dark, right? There was light and now it's dark. And you try to get up to find something to give you light, and you're barefoot, and boom, you stub your toe. Do you ever stub your toe? I hate that. It's awful. That's what Paul's describing here. They had this moral and spiritual blackout. They were once enlightened. They saw the light. They walked with Jesus. But now they were so focused on pleasing themselves and adapting that to what they felt was right around them. And it was just slowly blurred, and there's a blackout, and they were stubbing their toes spiritually left and right, and constantly frustrated. And their understanding and even the thought of fully knowing God and loving God was gone. Because all God was to them was, give me what I want to enjoy my life and keep me out of hell. You see the mind shift? It was not about how can I please you. It's, God, how can you please me? That's a scary place to be, friends. That's a very scary place to be. When we adjust our view of God to how can I please you, to God, you exist to please me, that's scary ground. And that's what Paul's saying where they were at, this blackout. You know, they didn't know him anymore. And because they didn't know him, they didn't know his ways. They didn't follow him. They become ignorant of God. And this was not a lack of knowledge. It's not like they didn't have the knowledge of it. What Paul is identifying is they had refusal to know him. And my friends, that's a scary place I fear we often find ourselves in. You know, we live in a day and age, more so than any time in the history of mankind. The knowledge of the gospel and understanding it is at our fingertips everywhere you turn. We have more opportunities today than we've ever had. is so much more brokenness and hurt. And I fear what happens is we, like the Gentiles in Ephesus, we struggle. It's not that the knowledge isn't available or we don't have the knowledge, but it's this refusal to know. This willful, I don't want to know him. My focus is just how can you please me? And this ignorance turned into a willful product of their hard hearts. They transformed, their hearts became hardened. Paul writes this in verse 19 of Ephesians 4. They lost all sensitivity. They have given themselves over to sensuality so as to indulge in every kind of impurity, and they are full of greed. Paul's identifying this process that happens, that he's identifying as the hardening of our hearts. See, it doesn't just happen in this really quick of an eye where today I was great and tomorrow what just happened? It's this slow fade. It's a slow fade. The more we adjust our view of God from, God, you're really cool, but how can you please me? And we view him more about, God, you are here to provide me the life I want, to bring me pleasure in my life. And then my life is all focused about how can I make me happy? How can I build myself up and what I want in life? And everything shifts towards that. And before we know it, we see the slow fade towards a hardening of a heart. And when we give ourselves over to this, just like the Gentiles in Ephesus, what began to happen is they gave themselves over more to the pleasures that they felt pleased them rather than how can I please the Lord. And the more your life becomes about this, about how can I give into the pleasures to make me happy than pleasing him, then what happens in this journey is then we give ourselves over to the sensualities, the greed, the impurities, and then it just develops this hard heart that then before you know it, your life is full of vanity. I built all this, but it's still not making me happy. It's not fulfilling, and my life is foolish because I'm chasing all this stuff to try to make me happy, and it just never happens, and so I'm just constantly frustrated. That's the life that Paul is describing. When he says, our journey now, when we gave our lives to Jesus, is not how do I please me, it's how do I please the Lord? How do I please him? Paul goes on this way in the next verses in chapter 4. That, however, is not the way of life you learned when you heard about Christ and were taught in him in accordance with the truth that is in Jesus. You were taught with regard to your former way of life to put off your old self, which is being corrupted by its deceitful desires, and to put on the new self, created to be like God in true righteousness and holiness. See what Paul's saying there? There's a new standard here. And those of you who have given your life to Jesus, you can't be straddling the walk. You can't hey, God, I really like you. Give me the good stuff, but how can you please me? You can't live a life that's focused on trying to please yourself, because what Paul's saying there is then when we give over to that, guess what you begin to do? Your heart is deceitful. And the more you give your life over to that, your deceitful heart gets in the way and blurs things and blackouts things, and you miss it, but you need to put off that old self. You need to say, I am a new creation. I'm a new person, and I'm living for him. And I need to have a mind and attitude shift towards Christ and walk with Christ. And I need to live in the way of truth. And that means I need to live my life trying to know God more. It's not about the religion and trying to do all the do's and don'ts. No, I want to know him more. And as I know him more, how can I please him with my life so I can experience the joy that he has for me? So I don't have to live in these frustrations anymore. And the next verses from there, Paul really gets down into dealing with some of the practical stuff that was going on in Ephesus in that day that I think is stuff that we deal with today too. And I encourage you to read it just to give you a highlight of some of those change of conducts that Paul highlighted there. He said, first, you need to stop gossip. Stop gossiping and stop lying. Be an honest person. Stop tearing people down. Stop making it all about you. And then he goes on to say, control your anger. He says, he's seeing so many people because of their frustrations in life, what's happening is they're just angry people. They're just angry all the time. And because they're angry all the time, their anger leads to sin and to poor choices, and they sin out of their anger. So he's saying, stop it. Stop being such an angry person. Stop allowing your anger to lead you to sin. And then from there, he goes on to say, stop stealing. And when he says stop stealing, what he's really saying is stop taking advantage of all the people around you. Because in Ephesus, they were so focused on pleasing themselves and getting what they wanted. It was about how could they get themselves ahead, which means they always took advantage of other people. They took advantage of people like crazy just to get themselves ahead. And Paul's saying, stop it. You live a generous life. Stop being a person that takes advantage of other people just to get yourself ahead. And then he says to control your tongue. Stop using your words to tear people down, and you use your words to build others up. You be an encourager. And then he goes on from there to get rid of all bitterness, rage, anger, brawling, and slander. Rather, he said, that is not who you should be. As a new person, in this new stage of conduct, you be a person that shows kindness and compassion and forgiveness. So when people see you, they see you're a person of kindness, compassion, and forgiveness because you represent God. You're living by a new standard. Can I just ask you, when you hear that list, bitterness, rage, anger, always getting into arguments or debates or fights or slander or tearing people down, you hear that list and compare it to kindness, compassion, and forgiveness. In your own heart, when you hear those lists, which best defines you in the normalcy of your life? I'm not saying like those moments when, I messed up, I let my anger get the best of me, because guess what? I struggle with that stuff too. But what this journey is all about is, in the normalcy of my life, which list do I best represent? Because you know what that ultimately reveals is the status and the nature of your heart. And so if you sit here and you're honestly saying, Bill, honestly, my Monday through Friday, I'm constantly a bitter person, an angry person. I'm always getting debates and arguments with people about everything, and I'm just that person. Probably something here we need to check with, right? Need to take steps towards Jesus. Because really what Paul's highlighting here is what this journey is all about, is to be imitators of God. When we live by this new standard, we recognize I live to please him, which means Jesus called me to be a follower of him, which means that in my life, I need to represent him well, and I represent him well by doing everything I can to know what pleases him and to follow him and imitate him in my life, in my behaviors, and my choices. Paul puts it this way in Ephesians 5, verses 1 through 2. Follow God's example, therefore, as dearly loved children, and walk in the way of love, just as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us as a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God. You see, what Paul's highlighting here is it's about this relationship to know God. And the more we know God, the more we love God, and the more we follow his examples, and the more we experience it. Because what we see all throughout the New Testament is when we give our lives to Jesus, we become a new creation. In other words, the Spirit of God recreates us into something new. And as he recreates us into something new, we experience his goodness and his blessings more and more. We get a taste of eternity here on earth. But it happens the more we walk with him and follow his example and live like him. You know, that's the beauty of what baptism is all about. Baptism is making that commitment to Jesus. I am committing to you. And I want to identify myself completely through you, through your death, your burial, and your resurrection. I want to find who I am completely through you and walk with you. I am now a new person. And I'm journeying with you. And the Bible teaches us that when we give our lives to Jesus, we are now adopted. We're adopted as sons and daughters in his spiritual family. And so, don't you think if that's the case, that we ought to bear the family resemblance in our life. If you've given your life to Jesus, don't you think that your life should represent the spiritual family that you're in when you walk with him? So what does it mean to imitate God? What does that look like? Well, Paul gave us those basic realities of what it means. The first is to imitate God is to walk in love. Jesus even said, they will know you are my disciples by your love. Love is the foundation to this. Love is the reality. Love is what brought Jesus to the cross. And love is represented by serving and sacrificing. It's completely opposite. You see, when I live to please myself, and it's all about me, I don't serve and sacrifice. I'm selfish. I figure out how can I get myself ahead. But when I live to please the Lord and I walk in love, guess what my focus is? How can I live in such a way that constantly serves and sacrifices those around me? The other way that we imitate God is to walk in light. To experience his light and to walk in light. Verses 8 through 10 of Ephesians 5, Paul writes, for you were once darkness, but now you are a light in the Lord. Live as children of the light. For the fruit of the light consists in all goodness, righteousness, and truth, and find out what pleases the Lord. Paul highlights the reality. Hey, when we walk in light, we experience his light in our lives, and his light is what guides us and leads us. It comes out through goodness. It's the moral qualities. It's the kindness. It's the justice. It's the purity. It's the gentleness. Then he says it's the righteousness. It's being right before God. It's living in such a way that I strive for holiness. And what holiness just means, it means I'm set apart. I'm not going to become like all the world around me. I want to live by a new standard and walk with God and walk what pleases him because I walk in truth. See, Paul highlights when you walk in light, your life consists of goodness, righteousness, and truth that guide you because that is the reality of his light. And he gets back to this statement that we should circle in our Bibles because this is the crucial statement in all of this. He wrote, find out what pleases the Lord. Find out what pleases the Lord. This is where the mind shift has to happen. Just like that day I got married. And in those early days of marriage, I had to change my mindset to this relationship is not about how can it make Bill happy. But my happiness in this relationship comes when my focus is all about how can I please my wife? What pleases her? And how can I walk that out? How can I live that out? And the same is true in our relationship with Jesus. When we stop viewing this Christianity thing as a religion and start seeing it as a relationship, that's the God that sent his son to this world to die for us, and this mind shift that happens to, he didn't come to please us, he came so we can experience him more and the value and the reality of this relationship more, and that has to, in order for that to happen, we need to adjust our mindset, and that is, how do I please the Lord? My challenge for you is to start asking yourself that question on a regular basis. Start praying that, God, how can I please you more? What does that look like in my life right now? What do I need to do? How can I put off my old self more and put on my new self more in you? Which leads to the last one, and that's to imitate God is to walk in wisdom. Is to walk in wisdom. Paul wrote this in Ephesians 5, verses 15 to 16. Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. So Paul's saying there, to walk in wisdom is to recognize that there's deceit in here and there's deceit all around me. The days are evil. But in this, there's always these opportunities that God's giving to us to know him more and to please him more, and to experience him more in our life. And what Paul's saying there is just keep walking. Just keep walking. Even those difficult days, just keep walking. Just keep working with him and walking with him. And here's the struggle. We often confuse wisdom with knowledge. We think, well, if I know more, then I'm wise. And guess what? There's a lot of people with a lot of book knowledge that aren't really wise people, because wisdom is not what you know. Wisdom is what you do with what you know. And God's not interested in book knowledge Christians. He's interested in faithful followers. That's where he's interested. That's where the wisdom come. Wisdom is faithfully living out what you know to follow Christ. And as you get to know him, you know more about how can I faithfully honor you in my life. Because every day I want to know him more and please him more. And every day God gives you opportunities. So here's my challenge for you today, guys. What's your next step? Where are you at in this relationship with Jesus? And I'm going to be honest with you, everybody sitting in this space has a next step. And if you walk out of here and you're under the assumption that I'm good, I don't really have a next step, you're missing something. You're missing something. So my challenge for you today is ask yourself, God, what is it that can please you more? How do I need to change that mindset to shift more towards you and to walk with you? Maybe you've never given your life to Jesus. Maybe you've never taken that step and you've had all the reasons why. And maybe today's a day that you need to take that step and commit. You've never been baptized. You never fully committed to Jesus through his death, his burial, and his resurrection. And today's the day to take that step. If that's you, you've never taken that step, you've never committed your life to Jesus, then let's take that step. If you're sitting here and you have excuses or reasons as to, I don't know why, I have questions, I'm not sure, we'd love to talk to you. Let's chat. Let's talk it out. Or maybe you're sitting here today and you've given your life to Jesus, but you've been walking that line like the Gentile Christians in Ephesus. I gave my life to Jesus. I really like him, but I've been living my life to please myself. And it's time for me to recommit. It's time for me to get real again. And if that's you today, you can recommit and say, Jesus, I need to get real. I've been living my life to please myself, and I want to please you. And make today the day that you say, Jesus, I'm all in with you. I want to change my life to follow you. Maybe you're here and you've been living a pretty decent Christian life, but let's be honest, there's still some of those disconnects, right? Nobody's perfect. We all have a next step to work on. So my challenge for you today is you pray hard this week. God, how can I please you? What is it that I'm still, in my life, I'm still living by my old self that I need to put away and follow you fully? What is that step for you? And my prayer, my challenge to you is identify that step, and let's take that step today. And if you want to talk to anybody or have anybody pray with you about that next step, we'll be at the Engage Impact booth at the back, and we'd love to talk with you and pray with you. But let's pray right now. Father in heaven, I love you and I thank you for you, how good you are. And Lord, in this moment, may we experience your love and your goodness even more. Lord, every one of us has a next step. Every one of us has a disconnect in our relationship with you. And Lord, I just pray that we all may be honest and ask that question, God, how can I please you? What does that look like in my life? What are the things that I need to put away to follow you more fully? I pray for those here today that need to make a step towards you in their commitment, whether it's giving their life to you for the first time, whether it's taking the step of being baptized, whether it's recommitting, whether it's just putting away something of the old self. Lord, whatever those may be, help us to identify those steps and actually take them. And as we take them, may we experience you more. We love you and praise you in the name of Jesus. Amen.